Paula, I wanted,
Yeah.
Paula, can you hear me?
Hold on. I'm going to mute, okay?
Yep, I wanted to just mention that when you're the only presenter besides me who's on the phone. So when you're finished presenting, if you'd like to mute your line using *6, or if you have a mute button on your phone, but *6 works. Great.
Do you know how to turn off call waiting on the phone? Because we get
Turn off call waiting. No, I don't know how to do that.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll just have to talk through it. It'll be fine.
Okay. Yeah, *6 will mute your phone, and then you'll still be able to hear, of course, but we won't hear any background noise.
Yeah. No, that's
okay. Thank
that's
you.
fine. And I can actually mute until I present as well.
Sounds good. Yep.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Welcome, Julie and Renee from Sandwich. Great. We're going to be getting started in just a couple of minutes. Welcome, Nancy. Welcome, Maureen. Welcome, everyone. This is Carolyn Jacobs with WGBH Education, and thank you very much for joining us. This session is one in a continuing series we're doing around interactive lessons on PBS LearningMedia. On behalf of everyone at the WGBH Education Department, I want to extend our sincere appreciation for all that you are doing to keep in touch with your students, to take care of them not only instructionally but also socially and emotionally. I know that many of you have very serious challenges, and we're doing our best to do our part and support you in any way we can. This session is sponsored by WGBH Education and PBS LearningMedia, which is a free digital media service for K-12 educators, offering thousands of free resources across the curriculum. And everything that we're going to show you this evening is available here on this website, PBS LearningMedia. A bit of housekeeping. As you can imagine, there are enormous pressures on connectivity. If your screen freezes or crashes or whatever, I encourage you, number one, to close out of all other apps, log off, log back in, maybe using a different browser. You can also put a comment in the chat box if you're having issues. We'll do our best to help you. But we are recording, and the recording will go ahead. And so if you do miss something, you will see it and hear it on the recording. We're going to reserve the chat box for just chat and comments, and Matul and Ethan from WGBH are in the background. They're attending to the Q&A box, and they will also be posting lots of URLs in the chat box. If you have questions, please post them in the Q&A box, and you see that in kind of the middle of the screen on the right-hand side. And we will be responding to you individually or to everyone if your question is pertinent to the group. So Q&A should go into the question box. And down at the bottom, the file share box, that is a document that you can download now that has the URLs of everything we're showing tonight, as well as the deck is being shared, and the post-webinar survey, et cetera, et cetera. So you're welcome to download that anytime. I'm joined this evening by Paula Edelson, UNC-TV Public Media in North Carolina. She's a senior producer and instructional designer, and Paula and her team produced several of the lessons that you're going to see showcased this evening on PBS LearningMedia. And then we are very, very pleased to have 3 Massachusetts middle school science teachers join us to talk about individual lessons, interactive lessons that they have either used or plan on using or find intriguing. And they all have different takes on those lessons. And they are Dan Adler of Up Academy Leonard, Ray Zapata, Irving Middle School in Roslindale, and Molly Sorrows, Luther Burbank Middle School in the Neshoba district. I'm going to do a very brief introduction to interactive lessons and then turn it over to Paula, who's going to go into a little bit of the pedagogy and functionality of specific interactive lessons that UNC-TV has produced. We're going to hear individual teacher stories from through teachers, and then I'll come back for a few announcements. All right, interactive lessons on PBS LearningMedia are very appropriate for what we're going through right now with distance learning. They can be self-paced. They are contained modules where a student can be one-to-one with a screen. They can be assigned in parts or in total. They all contain lots of media, short informational text, short videos, assessment, interactive activities, etc. And the interactive lessons cross over all grades and subjects, but we are very strong in science. When you go to PBS LearningMedia, a very easy way to search them is to start with the subject area right at the top on the home page. And in this case, I've clicked on science, and you can see the choices under science: earth and space, life, physical, etc. And then I've clicked on earth and space science, and then type right here in the middle. This is a resource type. Resources include everything from short video clips, lesson plans, interactives, PDF documents, etc. And you can select interactive lesson as your resource type. And then in the search results, click on a resource that appeals to you. And in this case, I've selected mountains and rain shadows. Note down here under the image where you launch the lesson, there's a link to support materials and standards. And then this heart outline, which when I click on, fills in, and that means that I have favorited the lesson, and it will appear in my favorites, which are in the drop-down under my name. We have gone in detail over searching and favoriting, et cetera, in other webinars, and all of our webinars are recorded and available through the WGBH Education YouTube channel. Here are some examples of interactive lesson titles for middle school science, just to kind of whet your appetite a little bit. And we've put together a folder to help you get started so you can easily save and share resources on Learning Media through folders. And this folder, Matul will post this in the chat box, but this is a folder that we've populated with many of the middle school science ILs to get you started. And we're going to use the term IL sometimes because interactive lesson is a mouthful. And lastly, I wanted to encourage you to start by going to the teacher tutorial on PBS Learning Media. It's called Using Interactive Lessons in the Classroom. And it's a great way for you to become familiar with the lessons, the structure of them, and also see how they're used in classrooms. We did some filming of 3 different classrooms, elementary, middle, and high, and those classroom videos are embedded in the tutorial using interactive lessons. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Paula.
Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Hi, everyone. I'm Paula Edelson, Senior Producer and Instructional Designer for UNC-TV Public Media, North Carolina. And I'm happy to be here tonight to present some of our interactive content. And so it makes sense, probably, to begin this with the first interactive lesson we've produced, Newton's Triple Play, which applies Newton's 3 laws of motion to the game of baseball. It's aligned to middle school standards, but it's appropriate for high school as well. The Newton lesson starts off with kind of a fun tease video, courtesy of Major League Baseball. So let's take a look.
It's baseball, man. You see all these kids come out. That's why I like to play, because whenever I was their age, I wanted to be where I'm at now. So, I mean, that to me is the biggest part of baseball.
But besides the sheer fun of the game, there are other parts of baseball too. Things like forces, which are pushes and pulls on objects, and motion, which is the process of moving or being moved. Both forces and motion come into play when a pitcher throws, when a batter hits, when a player soars, and when a fielder catches. Forces and motion are fundamental to life as we know it. Without them, there would be no pushing or pulling, no movement, no sliding, no throwing, no connecting, and no baseball.
Okay. Right. So I'm not going to show this segment, but all of our interactive lessons feature short animations that explain the science. Kids can watch the animation as often as they like, read the transcript, and then when they're ready, answer prompts in the notes box at the bottom of the page. After each animation, there's an online quiz. This one is kind of fun since the kids can press a video and then choose the one that's an example of a Newton law. We've completed 5 ILs since the Newton lesson, and the list is growing. Our true focus for these interactive lessons is middle school physical science. So the one I'm going to show you tonight is on a life science topic. It's actually an introduction to genetics. There's a tiny red arrow at the bottom right pointing to it, but here's a close-up. The Life's Instruction Manual IL is a bit of an anomaly, not only because it's a life science topic, but also because while it's a standalone lesson, it can also serve as a subset of a fuller lesson, which is called More Alike Than Different. This is a fairly robust lesson, and it includes up to 2 weeks of class time activities. The More Alike Than Different lesson is arranged in the form of a 5E plan, combining hands-on activities with an interactive component. And of course, that interactive component is Life's Instruction Manual, and that serves as the explain activity in the 5E plan, and we'll get to that in a minute. But first, here are a couple of engage and explore options. Okay. One of said engage options is this segment. We call this an inquiry animation because it poses a question to the class, which you'll see at the end. It also highlights some great work by local middle and high school students who kindly rewrote my totally uncool dialogue. They voiced the piece and they also did the sound engineering and the mixing. So let's take a look.
Here comes Mark. He's handsome, smart, with all the swag. And then there's me. Ghost to him.
You are so obsessed with him. You are smart, and I think you're pretty.
Nah, I'm just basic.
Well, I think he is basic.
He's a boss man.
You think Mark is boss? He's just as regular as all of us.
And I'm Queen Bee.
And I'm Bruno Mars.
Wow, that's self-esteem for you. Let me tell you something. You two and Mark, genetically speaking, are 99.9% alike.
Yeah, okay, right.
Dream on.
Oh, and know what? You and that banana are 60% alike. And that chicken over there, 60% too.
Now you're really messing with us.
No, I'm dead serious.
Okay, and genetically speaking, this bleacher is almost my identical twin.
Alright, you're just gonna have to take my word for it.
Hey, you are serious. So, okay, how are we almost identical to the high school royalty over there?
Listen up. Gabby has asked us a question, so now you tell us. How are all humans more than 99% alike?
Okay. So following this segment, and I'm just going to following the segment, students can talk about some differences between a chicken and a banana, or they can fill out a student handout. And by the way, student and teacher handouts along with a list of cheap supplies are all included in the lesson and downloadable. Here's an explore activity that delves a bit deeper into the banana. It's a lab with instructions on how to extract and view its DNA. The heart of the lesson is the interactive lesson, a life's instruction manual which focuses on the genome and the way it is organized. Rather like an instruction manual for life, it turns out. Every interactive lesson begins with a glossary so that kids can learn the terms first and then learn the science the terms apply to. These are animated, so definitions are both written out and shown. The three animations included in this interactive lesson are Genome 101, DNA 101, and Genes 101. So here's a portion of the genome animation 101.
The instruction manual for an organism has many parts, and learning what does what can get a tad confusing. Luckily, life and the instructions for it are really well organized, from the most basic components to the more complete set of instructions. And the story starts with DNA, which is a molecule made of 4 basic coding parts, kind of like an alphabet, but with only 4 letters. Those letters are arranged into sentences, also known as genes. Each sentence or gene is the instructions to build a protein. Some sentences are short, some are long, but each is a complete thought. Those sentences are arranged into chapters or chromosomes, and a collection of those chromosomes make up the complete instruction manual, also known as the genome.
So right after the animation, take us just a second here. Right after the animation is a drag and drop quiz which reinforces the information that the video showed. And all of our ILs include an organizing activity, sometimes 2 at the end, which pulls the lesson together and helps prepare the kids for their final evaluation project. The evaluation for the full lesson, and also actually for all our interactive lessons, they ask kids to put together a continuous narrative of the concepts they've learned. There are some options here for what they can include in the narrative, which can be a paper or something multimedia. And I end this presentation with a reminder that our list of interactive lessons is growing, And the next few lessons will be focusing on returns to middle school physical science. So stay tuned for Light Waves, our next IL. And that's it from me, except to introduce our next presenter, Dan. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Paula. Can you folks hear me? Awesome, cool. So first of all, just as I launch in, like Paula said, I'm actually going to be covering two interactive lessons that
Dan, you might
come
be
from
muted.
UNC.
We can't hear you yet.
Oh, can you hear me now? Seems like people are typing yes.
No, we still can't hear you.
The people in the chat say they can hear me, Carolyn.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Should I go for it, or do you want to hang on for a sec? Carolyn, whenever you're ready to move on, we can go get started. Let me know if you want to make sure your audio is all set first. Oh, Carolyn has lost her audio. While Carolyn is figuring out her audio, just one more time, really quick shout out to Paula. The two ILs that I'm about to present on are both from UNC-TV, and they're both phenomenal. I'm really excited to talk about them. If you just give us one moment. So first of all, like I said, my name is Dan Adler. I'm a sixth grade science teacher in Lawrence, Massachusetts. One of the reasons I love teaching in Lawrence is because we have a lot of language learners. So 37% of our school population are language learners, and for 78% of my students, their first language is not English. And part of why I love these resources from PBS LearningMedia is because they allow me to make things really visual and interactive to allow students to access content through multiple modalities and with really great scaffolds to ensure mastery. So like Paula said, the first one I want to talk about is the Sound Waves interactive lesson. And this one is really neat. I know someone in the chat was talking about, are these aligned to mass? Are they aligned to NGSS? You can see that there's a little standards button where you can check out the standards. This is aligned to the NGSS standards, but it's also very well aligned to the Massachusetts standards around amplitude and frequency. It's really neat. And like I said, part of why I really love these ILs is because they're so well suited for my language learners, but also all of my students. So for example, you can see here the term waves is bolded and in blue. And that's because you can hover over all of those terms to get the definitions, which I think is a really great way that my students, as they work through, can make sure they're understanding the vocabulary. In addition, there are all these really great short videos. You saw Paula put up a few of them, and you're going to see another one in a minute from this Sound Waves interactive. And also there are these great check for interactive questions that students have to type as they watch various videos and move through various parts of the lesson. And then as the teacher, I can check their reactions to those check for understanding questions as they move through their work. So Carolyn, if you can hear me, can you play the video of the frequency clip?
A sound like this and a sound like this are different. But how? Both waves have the same amount of energy. Each particle is getting pushed the same distance, therefore they are the same volume. But the rate at which they vibrate is different. This rate of vibrations per second is called frequency. If the vibrations are more frequent, the higher the pitch. If the vibrations are less frequent, the lower the pitch. To change the pitch of a sound, you have to change how many times the medium vibrates per second. Take a guitar string, for instance. As you tighten the string, the number of vibrations the string produces per second increases, and so does the pitch. Lower that string tension, and the vibrations per second decrease, and so does the pitch. So hit that dance floor again, and this time, feel the vibrations per second.
So clearly the most important part of that clip is the really great science pun at the end, because I can't resist a good science pun. But also I know someone was typing in the chat, what's the standards alignment like? I teach 6MS PS41, which is about using diagrams of simple waves to teach wave properties. This simple, really well illustrated clip gets at amplitude and frequency and energy. And that's just one of the really great animations that you can work through as you move through the interactive lesson. I see Heather's asking about checking for understanding, which I actually think is great because I'm about to go to all of the different ways you can check for understanding, Heather, if you just hold on for one sec. Another really cool interactive feature of this and a way that my students can access the work is through really clear glossaries of vocabulary. So right in the second page of the IL, the students get to see amplitude, compression, frequency, energy, and when you click on the little play, it illustrates what that term means. So the students just get so many reps on those words, and it's not just the word and the definition, but it's also a really quick piece of audio and a really quick visual. Again, just lots of different ways for my students to access the content. And I know someone was talking about checking for understanding. One of my favorite parts about the interactive lessons is there's actually a lot of different ways that these interactive lessons can check for understanding. Sometimes at the end of the video, there's just a prompt and a text box where students have to do something like a stop and jot where they have to type their answer. Sometimes it looks like this at the bottom, which is a matching exercise. Students need to drag the correct term into the right sentence to show that they can use the word in context. Also, many of the interactive lessons have multiple choice questions. So for example, here is another one of those really cool interactive lessons from UNC-TV called The Meaning of Matter. And this is a screenshot from one of the checks for understanding, where students need to just work through, as one of the pages of the lesson, some multiple choice questions that go over the key content that they've learned so far. And they also get immediate feedback. It will tell the students if they are correct or not. The last piece of accessibility and scaffold that I wanted to highlight, I know Paula talked about the really rich final tasks, and I totally agree with her. I also really like the fact that all the final tasks have ways for my students to organize their thinking before they go about that final task. So here's the final task for the sound wave exercise. And like Paula said, you can do it graphically in writing a multimedia project, but before you get to work, you have the opportunity to write your key definitions, to make your own cards for your outline. And these are all different ways that students can make sure they're prepared to do a meaningful final task. This is a similar one for that matter interactive lesson, where before they do the final task, they need to drag the cards into the correct column to make sure they understand pure substances, mixtures, elements, and compounds. And this is something that's frequently confusing to students. And they just get one more opportunity with this scaffold to practice before they go ahead and write their final task. So again, these are just all different ways that I think my students get access to really neat scaffolds that help set them up for success as they move through these interactive lessons. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Ray.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Raymond Zapata. Can everybody hear me?
I think we can, Ray.
Perfect. So today I'm going to be talking about the two interactive lessons. But first off, again, I teach 7th grade science in Boston Public Schools. I currently teach at the Urban Middle School. My student population is mostly Hispanic or African American. The interactive lessons, one of the reasons why I use them mainly is because PBS LearningMedia resources have been helpful for me and my students. They can work at their own pace and students can track their progress firsthand, allowing them to be independent self-learners. So one of the first interactive lessons I was introduced to was how disruptions affect animal populations. And one of the reasons why I chose this was because it is aligned to what I teach. So the first unit that I teach is diversity of life. So it's all the math standards aligned to life sciences. I believe that this IL could be helpful for me. Unfortunately, when I was introduced to this IL was after I finished my diversity of life unit, and now we're working in Earth history. One of the reasons why I like working with or teaching with the ILs is the interface in the windows. It is very clear, as Dan and Paula mentioned, there's tabs at the top that students could easily navigate. There's a menu drop down where it allows them to see all the page numbers. Students also could see their work on the My Work tab, and the glossary also I believe is a very helpful factor, especially for my students, because I start all my classes with my content and language objectives. So it's pretty cool to see that there's still a glossary section in the interactive lesson. Another reason why I like using the ILs is because the feedback that I've gotten from my students was when I first introduced them to PBS LearningMedia before this unforeseen break, we were using MobiMax as a study tool, and MobiMax honestly was not as effective as PBS LearningMedia. And what I like about PBS LearningMedia is how effective it could be for my students, and my students benefit from visual learning. As you can see here, this is one of the prompts in the How Disruptions Affect Animal Populations, and it's pretty much describing what would you think would happen if this disruption occurred in an ecosystem near you. So students can gather their thoughts in regards to what they learn and sort of what they know. Another thing that I highlight as well is the videos and the glossary terms, as Dan mentioned. One thing that is pretty neat about this IL is that towards the end, this is towards the second to last slide of the interactive lesson, you can see kind of the 3 videos that are mentioned in the IL, and also each video has a list of glossary words or vocab terms that are aligned to each video. Right here is an example of a graphic organizer. I believe that using graphic organizers are highly effective, especially in my classroom. So using this platform with my students has not been any disconnect. They actually enjoy it more because they can actually track their work, as I mentioned before, and have a clear understanding of what they're actually doing. And there's a summary section where they can just write notes. And the second IL that I am working with was actually the first IL that I started when we went on this unforeseen break, and it's called Water Resource Issues. And it actually is tied in with what I'm actually teaching, which is Earth history. And again, one of the things here as I display is the menu. As you can see on the left, these are the 8 pages where when you're working, this is where students can track their work. Down below, this is the window that students will see in each page that they've completed any work. And again, the graphic organizers, I feel like the graphic organizers in this interactive lesson were really clear. And this also allows students to track and to go back to their own work and kind of see if whatever vocab word that they're looking for, they can use the percentage of use and the definition of each one. So the graphic organizer is a way for students to summarize their work. And I find it to be extremely effective. Again, so what I really like about this interactive lesson is how students can make their own thinking visible. And one of the things that I find is that they get to see they get to see both videos, and they're asked a series of questions in regards to what do you see, what do you think is happening, and what is happening in the water supply in the Southwest in 15 years of a drought. And with that, I'll be passing it on to Molly Saros.
Thanks very much, Raymond. My name is Molly Saros, and I teach 7th grade science in Lancaster, part of the Neshoba Regional School District. I'm at the Luther Burbank Middle School. We have about 240 students in grades 6 to 8. 34% of our students are identified as high needs, and one of the things that I like about the interactive lessons from WGBH and the other content providers is that they provide high quality video clips that expose the students to new ideas and deeper material than many of them have been exposed to in the past, and that they come with supporting questions and activities, and they guide students to work at their own pace. One of the interactive lessons that my students and I have really enjoyed is the Evolution Lab, and we've used this for a number of years now. I think it will work really well in the remote learning environment that we find ourselves in now, and I'm going to be starting it in a week or two. This interactive is divided into 6 missions, each of which presents a different category of evidence of evolution. It addresses 3 of the middle school life science standards, and one thing I particularly like is that it includes several of the science and engineering practices as well. So students are asked to construct explanations, to engage in argument from evidence, and to obtain, evaluate, and communicate information. The interactive lesson interface for students is shown on the left, and it prompts them to open the game portion, which I've shown on the right. For remote learning, I envision students having 2 windows open. They could be side by side, or they could switch between them. In class, when I've done this, we start by watching the introductory video that's shown on the left here together. And I'm looking at doing this in the same time environment on Google Meets with those students who choose to kick off the activity together. But they can just work independently in their remote learning environment because the video is accessible right on the interactive lesson for them. The interface to this lab on the right provides several different types of activities in addition to the main game. So I recommend exploring that yourself and deciding whether you want to use the deep tree portion, which allows them to explore and determine how closely different organisms are related. It's really cool, and it takes you straight into being able to compare 2 very different kinds of things, even a sunflower and a lizard, and look at how closely related they are. But it is a little bit separate from the main part of this interactive lesson. As we dive into the levels of the program, students explore different types of evidence. At the first level, shown here, red-green gecko, they're introduced to phylogenetic trees. Level 2 examines fossil evidence, and so on. The video introduction that students start with demonstrates how to use the Build-A-Tree area. We're going to play a quick clip here of how it looks like as you explore and use the interactive aspect. This is a clip of me using the interactive at a rather quick speed. So you see a lot of things happening. Students learn how to place the organisms, to see characteristics indicated by colored dots, to look up information about the organisms, and to follow the dots path to trace a path to determine correct placement. I put on the fungi, and the dots flow again, but the dots didn't all match. So I move the mushroom over. Again, the dots don't quite match. Some students work by trial and error, watching the colored dots, and others read more of the supportive material. Periodically, questions appear, like on the right here, asking students what they understand from the little piece of the activity they just did. They choose their answer and they click submit. We can return back to the slide. I found that everyone gets really engaged in working with this, and the activity gets much more complex at each level. That clip showed just the very beginning of the first level as they're learning and practicing the pieces and getting to know how to place those. As students work through each part, there's a series of questions that they can answer as they work through, and these appear embedded in the interactive lesson. They're also available as worksheets, like here. You see just multiple choice questions, and then other sections will show particular an image from the video that allows the students to reflect on what happened in the video, or a clip of a tree that was built in the video or similar to one that would be built, and ask them direct questions comparing the different parts, understanding what was related more closely and identifying those characteristics. As they keep as they complete each level, they build an understanding about a new set of evidence of evolution. I have found that in class, my students maintain an interest and engagement for a full week when we've done this in school. Some students completing 3 missions over that period, and others going much further in the program, really enabling them to work at their own pace. I'm going to now turn and show you one other interactive lesson. And this one is Sneak Jaws. And this interactive lesson is actually part of the middle school literacy connection. So in addition to having really good science, it really dives into some of the literacy issues as well. It has a great set of videos, readings, and questions, which help examine the cross-cutting concept of structure and function. So as we're working in science and we try and figure out how are we going to deal with these cross-cutting concepts that are defined as part of the standards, this is one way that we really get support doing that. Again, students progress through each section at their own pace. And for remote learning, I would think of assigning certain slides for certain days of learning. Below the launch image that was just there are links to the supportive materials and the standards. And so one piece of the support materials for this, in this interactive lesson, are some specifics about supporting the literacy strategies. So comparing and contrasting ideas is an important one in this, identifying and using text features, and determining important information. The support materials also clarify the goals, and they provide an overview of the entire interactive lesson. They're really helpful to the teacher as you're planning. They include suggestions for what to do before you begin the lesson, and also how to integrate the ideas with other things you're teaching in your class, or if you're using this in a face-to-face situation, things you might be doing with your class that go back and forth rather than just using the interactive all at once. Throughout the lesson, there are a variety of different kinds of questions and activities, like the matching activities you saw in the other interactive lessons that were presented this evening, and practice with vocabulary. There's also the My Work tab, so students can review their work all together. Here I'm showing a picture of the final assignment page. This is something that might look a little bit different in remote learning, but the final assignment, as written here, provides choice, which is wonderful. We're always trying to provide choice for our students. And this final activity asks students to choose a topic from the list they're given and write a short essay. And it provides some support for helping them do that, organizing their ideas first and guiding them to think about 3 supporting details they have and what evidence they have for this. I can envision students using the prompts in this assignment and then having them create a graphic organizer with their key ideas. And in remote learning, I might give another set of choices that they could then choose to write their answer in paragraphs, or to present their idea in the video clip where they explain their answer, or even create a slideshow with the images and explanation. I think we have a lot of flexibility that can be challenging to include in the remote learning environment, but also that provides a lot of new opportunities for them there. As you can see, this interactive lesson you see on the top right, it says page 11 of 11. So they've worked through each part of their interactive lesson, watching videos or doing a reading. There's some readings connected, and answering questions before they get to this final assignment where they're then supported in putting all those ideas together. So those are 2 interactive lessons that I've really enjoyed and that my students have gotten really engaged with. I hope that you find some that work well with you and the class material that you're using. And the mic back over to Carolyn Jacobs so you can hear some additional tips for getting started with the interactive lesson.
Great. Okay, this is Carolyn. Just give me a little confidence that you can hear me. Someone tell me in the chat box or on the line. Yes, they can hear me. Great. Wonderful. Thank you. All right, so I know that this was jam-packed with lots of information. We really wanted to include as many teacher perspectives as we could, as well as Paula as the producer. So some of you that this might be new to, your head might be spinning a bit. So I have a couple of tips for you. And one of them is, I can't remember if I have a slide on this or not, but if you go to the WGBH Education YouTube channel, that is where we archive all of our recorded webinars. And a couple of weeks ago, we ran a webinar just on interactive lessons in general. So it was not specific to science or middle school. It was in general with some more help about finding them, what they are, how to use them. There were two teacher presenters. So I would encourage you, if you're feeling a little lost or need a little more help getting started, to check out the recording of the April 16th interactive lesson. It was a Jumpstart interactive lesson webinar. And then lots of you are posting questions. I hope we're able to keep up with them, but I'm going to go through a few more slides about help to get you started. So on the home page of PBS Learning Media, and just a reminder that everything you saw tonight is available on pbslearningmedia.org, a free site of thousands of resources for K-12 across the curriculum, but we're very strong in science. On the home page of the website, at the very bottom on the right-hand side, in the right-hand corner, is the help link, and you see the URL to the help section there. This is a very robust help section with lots of categories. There's a section on student accounts. There's a section on Google Classroom. There's a section on signing up your students, viewing your student work, etc. So with lots of screenshots. So I would encourage you to do that. There's also an email if you have issues, learning media support at pbs.org, that is being actively monitored. So those are two things. I've got more. There are a new series of quick video tutorials on PBS Learning Media. And I don't have the URL to that right here, but I bet Matul does. So if you could put that in the chat box, Matul, please. These are very brief, brand new, and show a whole different variety of things to do on the site. And one of them is about having your students log in or using interactive lessons effectively. And then another resource for you is on the WGBH.org website. Now, WGBH.org is different from PBS Learning Media. PBS Learning Media is our education site. WGBH.org is the individual facing, or the main site for the station, Boston's PBS station. And we've recently launched a few weeks ago in response to this nightmare we're all going through, the Distance Learning Resource Center. You can see several tabs for educators, for families, etc. The Quick Start Guide is a slide deck that has lots of navigation tips. It was actually put together by Ethan, who is helping out in the Q&A box. He's part of the education department. So the Quick Start Guide is another resource for you to go to. Just recently, we launched the functionality that allows you to open up interactive lessons without being signed into PBS Learning Media. You are welcome to browse everything on PBS Learning Media without being signed in. But up until recently, we did require you to be logged in order to launch an interactive lesson, the point being that the interactive lessons are designed to save student work, and if you're not logged in, no work could be saved. But we've changed that. And so now you are able to open up lessons, you and or your students, without being signed into the site. And this is one easy way for you to preview lessons, for your students to click around in different lessons. If the student does start to enter their own work in the lesson without being signed in, we caution you that their work may not be saved if they end that session and go back in again. So we don't encourage you to do it that way, but that is an option. And then some teachers use the lessons without their students logging in because they're only interested in maybe in the final project, or they're not really viewing the student work along the way. So there's a lot of flexibility, and we encourage you to make it your own. I mentioned the recorded webinars, so there are a whole series of those, again, up on the WGBH Education YouTube channel. In March, we did a series of half-hour Jumpstart PBS LearningMedia webinars. So these are not specific to interactive lessons, but instead are some help to use the entire site to its maximum, and some searching tips and saving resources to folders, etc. So in addition to that, there are many webinars around our Earth and Space Science project, which has interactive lessons in it. That's called Bringing the Universe to America's Classrooms, the collaboration of WGBH and NASA. So if you teach at all Earth and Space Science topics across K-12, there are several webinars in that on our YouTube channel to help you get started in using those resources, also on LearningMedia. And coming up next week, I mentioned that this is one in an ongoing series. We're going to be doing a similar webinar to this for elementary, and that will be next Thursday evening. Just a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to give the presenters, because we have a little time, we'll look at the Q&A box, or if the presenters have some final words, something that maybe they want to reinforce. Part of this Distance Learning Resource Center is a new broadcast schedule on the World Channel, which is available throughout Massachusetts, and similar programming is available in other states if you're not a Massachusetts resident. So what we have done is reprogrammed the World Channel from 1 to 5 Monday through Friday for programming that's appropriate for grades 6 through 12. Lots of science content from NOVA, from Nature, from other science programming. Also, for ELA, there's Masterpiece, American Experience for Social Studies, etc. So that TV schedule is posted on WGBH.org, and every Wednesday, this is just a snapshot of what the schedule is for tomorrow, and every Wednesday morning at 8 a.m., the Director of Marketing, Denise Olson, is hosting a very brief webinar. The next one will be next Wednesday at 8 a.m. to give you a preview of the next week's broadcast schedule, and also to help you make connections to the classroom through resources. So that's another opportunity for you to draw on public media's work. I wanted to give a shout out to a brand new collection. I don't know if any of you have seen this yet. The second episode in the series was on TV last night. I just happened to stumble upon it. I wasn't even looking for it, and there it was. The Molecule That Made Us. This is a new series on television, and we in coordination with the series, we are publishing resources on PBS LearningMedia. So there are, I think, 4 of them up now, and many more are coming throughout the summer. We publish new content on the site all the time, and I encourage you to keep going back and searching because, and we do send out a lot of emails that let you know about new content, but we can't do that for everything. So if you would like to give us a little feedback, we'd really appreciate it. And also, if you would like a certificate to acknowledge your participation this evening, this is a link to a very brief post-webinar survey. We'll put the link in the chat box also. And you have through early next week to finish it. If for some reason you need an extension, just let me know. I'm sure we can accommodate that. But it really helps us, and we do pay very close attention to feedback we get and make adjustments. We encourage you to follow us on social media. We're very active. Matul, who's been in the chat box, heads up a lot of our social media postings. And I want to thank you. Thank you for coming this evening. Thank you for all that you are doing. I want to give a very hearty shout out to my co-presenters who did a bang-up job. Thank you, Paula Edelson from UNC-TV, North Carolina, Dan Adler, science teacher in Lawrence, Ray Zapata, science teacher in Roslindale, Boston Public Schools, and Molly Soros, middle school science teacher at Luther Burbank in the Neshoba district. So we have a couple of more minutes, and it's not a crime to end early, so by all means, sign off if you need to. We are recording this, and we'll be sending out the recording as well as links to other things, the survey, the resource document, etc., tomorrow in a follow-up email that will go out to everyone who registered. So I want to go to Paula first because I think, Paula, I know that you had a lot of things to say, and I told you had about 10 minutes, and you may have rushed a little bit. Do you want to add anything, Paula, before we sign off?
Just that we're at your service, and let us know how we can best serve you. You know, I mean, we know you guys are on the front line, and I apologize if I was a little bit mindful and I might have rushed things a little bit, but I'm here to listen. If anybody wants my email, you know, write to me or write to Carolyn, and she'll let me know, you know, how we can best serve you. That's what it's all about. So thank you all for listening tonight.
Thank you, Paula. And I want to reiterate the important contributions that UNC-TV makes to PBS LearningMedia in their interactive lessons in mostly in physical science, but not all in physical science for middle school. I've been working with Paula for several years now, and the lessons really are standout. There are, I don't know the official count, but there are probably 150 to 200 interactive lessons on PBS LearningMedia across the grades and across subjects, but again, we are very, very strong in science. So I'm just going to pause for a minute. I'm going to look at the Q&A box, and if any of the presenters want to add any comments, please feel free to do so.
Carolyn, can I jump in for a quick minute?
Go UNC. Thank you.
Carolyn, can you hear me?
Yes, Dan, go ahead.
I saw there was a question before about what does it look like to set this up on, you know, in this world of virtual teaching we're in. Something that I know came up in a previous webinar, and I will admit I haven't done this specifically with an interactive lesson, although I will definitely be doing it in a couple of weeks, is my plan is to use a free screencasting tool just to model for kids how to set it up. just because so much is asynchronous, my plan is to use something like Screencastify to record how I sign in and how I get started and highlight some pieces to students. And my hope is that will set them up for some success.
Great, thank you, Dan. And you reminded me that one of our educator ambassadors, Paula Halligan, who is from Worcester, and also she's a Google trainer, she is recording some very short tutorials about her experience with interactive lessons, and in particular, students accessing work, viewing student work, how to set it up with students, etc. So we're going to be launching those through social media. But in the meantime, all of the other help menus and links that we mentioned in this webinar should get you started. And then you are always welcome to email me. If I cannot answer your question, I'll pass it on to someone else in the department, but you will get a response. All right, I'm going to keep the chat box just open for another minute or so, and then close it out and wish you all a very lovely evening. And I hope you are now and continue to stay healthy, you and your family, as we stay hunkered down here and figure this all out. And thank you again, and good night, everyone.